Hello everyone. Finally, I get to review my new Neyman Longcoat here. So, I think before I review the coat, what I'll do is give you a little bit of history about why I use Longcoats and also the process of me getting this coat. So, personally, I like the look of Longcoats, whether historically or just now for HEMA. Obviously, a lot of people don't use them. Most people use typically the coat. Some people put the skirt on, and other people just wear the pants, the standard HEMA pants. There's no real big benefit to actually wearing a long coat. It can obscure your foot movement a little bit, but most seasoned HEMA practitioners, you're not going to fool them with a long coat. And it can protect your legs just a little bit, but unless you would have plates in them, which would then kind of make the coat move really weird down low. There's no real protection benefit to a long coat. It is primarily about looks, and that's why I wear long coats. I think they look really cool. So up to this point, I've owned from Arms Street their medieval long coat, which is sort of a half coat. It kind of comes down to the knees. Way down in my old videos from when I started posting videos years ago, I might be wearing that coat here and there. And then the one I've been wearing for many years now is another one from Arms Street, which is on their website is their Eastern European, Slavic / Mongolian long coat. It was a little bit custom because I cut the sleeves on it, whereas the version they sell normally comes with a full long sleeve. I wore that one for years and I liked it. The reason why I decided to switch was it's not an official Newton meter rated coat. So in a tournament or just in an environment where they're asking you to wear something that is an official coat, technically that coat is protective as this, and with the Under Armour I wore, it was very, very protective. But technically, someone could say that is not acceptable for a tournament or a certain environment. So that's why I decided to make this coat. Plus, I had a vision of a look I wanted to create, and I believe I've achieved that. And we'll go over that in a few moments. So next of all, I think what I'll start with is talking about the things I don't like about the coat or would change on the coat next time if I ordered the coat again. The reason why I'll start with that is because I actually don't have anything I dislike about this coat. In fact, the only things I'll talk about are things I will have changed if I could do it again. And once you get the coat and you wear it, you sort of get new ideas and just little changes and tweaks here and there. So really, I don't have any complaints about the coat. The quality is great. The stitching is great. The overall look came out the way I wanted. So I believe there's 2 or 3 things I would change if I could order the coat again. So the first thing I would do is communicate that this nice diamond design and material that I have here would also be the same material that would go down here. It's for mainly uniformity and the look of the coat. Outside of that, I'm happy with the way the bottom part of the coat turned out. I would just like to see that this nice diamond pattern actually being down below, or the pattern that's on the forearm here being down below. I just think it would look a little bit better. The other area I would have improved is I'd add a couple more zippers. So I'll be talking about the pockets and the removable armor coming up in a little bit here. But right off the bat, there's a couple zippers here that I would add and here that I would add. So for the underpiece, which I don't think needs anything, but I'd have a zipper for it, and I'd have a zipper for this front piece. That wasn't communicated. I wish I did. And then also I would have added a pocket that goes over the collarbone and over top of the bony part of the shoulder here. So basically the upper shoulder and trap, that you could move armor in and out for longsword versus lighter weapons as well. I believe, I might bring something up later in the video when I think about it, but I believe those are the only 3 things I would change on the coat. And none of them are misdesigns, and none of them are actually problems. They're all just, oh, in hindsight, you know, I should have done these things or communicated these things. Okay, so I guess that gets us to the coat concept. So for me, the concept of the coat was to be very mobile plus versatile. So that means I have a lot of pockets that I can pull armor in and out of to make the coat heavier or lighter based upon what I'm using it for. So the pockets I designed into the coat there's a pocket here for the front of the arm, a pocket back here for the back of the arm. There's 4 pockets here for the forearm. I'll get into the details of that in a moment. There are ribcage pockets, which Neyman puts pretty standard in a lot of their coats. Plus, I should have communicated to have a pocket here, but I've created my own. This stuff is pretty tough, so it won't tear. And I have a pocket here. There's also a back pocket as well, which I don't have any armor in. I never had any on my old coat, so I don't think I need it. The premise is that if I'm using the sword for longsword, I can armor it up, and I have some rigid, hard armor here, some softer armor for the front of the forearm. But if I go into a side sword tournament, or I'm going to be doing a lot of single-handed weapon sparring, I can start pulling out some of the plastic plates from here, which are doubled up on top of the softer stuff, you know, to give a little bit more mobility and to make it a little less rigid. Same thing with the arms. I can put more armor in or less armor in, depending on the armor level I need for what I'm sparring with. For the shoulder, since there is no shoulder pocket, I have just a pair of rugby shoulders here. It's just a shirt, so I can just pop this on for longsword and I'll have the shoulder protection I need. But most of the time, this coat I'll be able to wear without anything else. So Neyman sent, they have 3 types of armor in this coat. They have a soft sort of white stuff. They got a harder yellow armor and a really rigid, this one piece right here is orange, and it's quite rigid. So I've been experimenting with taking pieces in and out. And I found that the only places I needed to put in real rigid armor were these 2 pieces here, because that protects most of the forearm. And then anything on the inside here, I was able to remove this one and just keep one of these softer ones for the inside, which helps with actual arm mobility and flexing. So you can see here, the way I've pieced every piece of armor together, I have absolutely no arm restriction whatsoever, and it's very, very fluid. So I did have to trim up some pieces on some of the edges to help with the way the arm bends. So for instance, this piece here, I believe I've cut on an angle, versus this piece here I've cut on an angle, so that way when I close my arm, they don't bind on each other. That's one of the cool things about this coat, is I can customize every piece. So at first, I was putting in doubled up pieces of these for the torso, for the side protection, and the front. Overall, my whole last setup, so the under armor, the coat, the neck guard, the forearm guards, and everything, when weighed on my digital scale, was about 7.8 pounds, which is very light. This one, I started putting in all the doubled up pieces, ended up going over 10 pounds, which still is very light. And when you put on a whole coat and it gets distributed to your whole body, you don't notice it. This coat feels so light on me that the only thing I notice is a little bit of excess heat. Outside of that, it kind of just feels like wearing normal clothes, and the forearm feels a little bit bulky, but that's about it. But when I had these in doubled up, it shot the weight up by about 3 pounds. So I ended up pulling out pieces of my previous Under Armour for my other coat, which is a Troy Lee motorbike armor. And honestly, this is about the best armor there is out there. I'm trying to find where I can buy this and source this out. Their motorbike armor had 2 types, this thicker type and a thinner type. And then they had one that is just like this, same thickness, but it's harder. And what I did is I ended up taking out a lot of the pieces from that Under Armour because it's removable from that motorbike armor. And I started taking out the doubled up pieces and putting the piece behind the white piece, which is really good for thrust and shock protection. And then putting this stuff behind there, which cuts the weight down in half and adds a second layer of protection. So as you can tell, I just hit myself pretty hard there, and it's quite protective. So with the pieces together like that, I have really great protection in the front against thrusts, against the ribs here for, you know, just side shots that might come up from the bottom. And then for the arms, I took the piece out right here. I may put it back, I'm not entirely sure, because this back piece that's right here kind of rolls over top of to about the center of the bicep. And it might be just enough to protect me against most blows. And it goes all the way up to the top of the shoulder, about right there. So I may add in a small piece that doesn't go all the way up to the top, like I believe these are actually the pieces that came from out of there. So I thought they were a little bit too big and bulky, and they added restriction to the arm movement. So in the future, maybe against a longsword, I might add in a square piece that just kind of protects the actual bicep itself, because most of the shoulder is protected from this piece. One of the greatest areas of design that I worked on with Neyman fencing for this is the forearm. I basically said to him, I want to have forearm padding on the inside, not on the outside, that you can't see, that I can remove. So they came up with this 4-pocket system for basically putting armor in. And it's perfectly positioned where these 2 outside ones protect most of the arm, and then you got 2 inside ones here. And here, for instance, I've got the harder foam pieces. So I think the yellow and the orange version of these, which are a little bit thicker and harder. And on top of that, I've got some plastic inserts, which actually came out of my old forearm guard. And basically, I think I actually have the best forearm protectors I've ever had with this system I've created here. On the inside, I put lighter stuff. It helped with mobility. And I also trimmed it a little bit on angles so that when you're wearing a glove, it flexes. So basically, I have full wrist mobility and very little restriction from the forearm guards. Okay, a couple more little sub notes on this coat. How does it function with gloves, for instance? I think that's what most people want to know. So this design of glove and cuff and forearm guard here. You can see it's pretty narrow. I can actually get this on with just a little bit of tucking in of a couple pieces here of the forearm and then pulling it over. I can actually get this glove on. It does ride this armor up a little bit closer to the joint than I'd like, but it still gives me full mobility. But this is a tighter glove. If I use this glove, which you can see has a bigger cuff, which I think it's been designed that way for coats, this one doesn't cause me any restriction whatsoever, and it keeps the forearm exactly where it should be. So for me, that's really important. If I'm just doing light sparring and I pull out some armor, I don't have to be wearing gloves with specific design cuffs. I can just use a glove like this with fingertips and all the upper armor here and just do some light work with it, which is what I was doing when I was in class. I was actually using this glove most of the time, and I didn't notice any restriction with it. With my favorite design of gloves in general is now the hourglass shape. I think all gloves need to be designed this way, for my personal preferences at least. But when you put on a glove like this, one moment, you can see there's absolutely no restriction. Full wrist mobility. It overlaps just enough to actually give you the proper protection you're supposed to have. And down here, the only thing I did have to do is I did have to trim this little corner here on this glove. It was easy to do. I just used scissors and snipped it so that it doesn't snag when I'm doing wrist movements. I found when it had that little corner sticking out, it would snag against the cuff and kind of just catch it. And it was more annoying than anything. And that's about the only thing I had to do to, get this glove to work with this coat. So honestly, with this and this forearm setup, this is the perfect combination. While I was sparring yesterday, I didn't notice the forearms. That was the thing. The few times I got hit on the forearm, it kind of reminded me that I had the forearms. I didn't notice any restriction, any extra weight on the forearm. It might have been even a little bit less weight than my other setup. yeah, I find this very cool. Every set of gloves I have that I've now ordered, I have a whole bunch of gloves on the way, by the way. I have 3 of them on the way. All of them have some sort of hourglass shape or design to them, so they should work with this forearm setup, I hope. The neck piece itself, when done up properly, is a doubled up neck piece. So this piece here and this piece. There's nothing rigid there. It comes up high enough that I don't need to add any other Under Armour underneath this, and it does have a blade catcher. But what I think I'm going to be doing in the blade catcher right here is I'm going to be adding a piece of foam, the more rigid version of this, under there as well. Just because even though it's doubled up, a thrust here is still going to hurt the throat. So I'm probably going to put a little harder piece underneath the blade stop, and then I think my neck piece is as good as it will get. So the current setup of this coat I have is primarily for longsword right now. I managed to actually get some sparring in due to work and broken finger and whatnot. I haven't been sparring much lately, but I have a friend who came back from sailing on a ship for a while and wanted to get some sparring in. So I sparred with him, which was great. So I got to actually move around in the coat after I had tweaked each piece of armor to the way I like it. And I do have to say, compared to my old kit I wore, it's just as mobile, if not maybe a little bit more mobile. I will have to admit my last setup I had was very, very mobile. And I was very fast in it, and it gave me all the protection I needed. This is equal to that, if not a little bit better in certain areas. For instance, the forearm protection. I do have to add a spec elbow cap to this when I fight. But that doesn't create any restrictions or movement problems. But the way the weight of this coat is distributed, I'm going to say it's probably faster than my last setup, but I'm going to have to use it a little bit more to really judge that. But I feel just as protected, more protected in areas. For instance, the chest, center of the chest particularly, I feel more protected, and the forearms I feel more protected. While moving around in the coat, I think I'm also not getting quite as hot. My last one, because it was technically something that was doubled up. So I had the thick coat, and underneath that I had the Troy Lee motorcycle armor, which had breathable mesh and all sorts of breathable materials. But when you doubled up all of that stuff together, it really did hold the heat in quite a bit. I found it cooler than wearing regular HEMA fencing coats, for instance, Spez and wherever, Superior Fencing or wherever you may get it from. I did find my old setup cooler than those, but I think it's a little bit hotter than this. I also managed to, yesterday as well, do a full longsword class in the coat, and during that, I think I was a little bit hotter and sweating a little bit more than in a normal class without wearing anything. So I was truly impressed with how cool I managed to stay in this. As I said earlier in the video, I might think of a few things I would do differently, and I just thought of one. So number 4 would be probably in the back and maybe down the back of the arms. I might get Neyman to put in their breathable mesh that they put in on their Type 0 coats or some of the coats they've done in the past to have a little bit more breathability. But overall, this coat, I think, like I say, is the most breathable coat I've had. And just even sitting here, I'm warm, but I'm not really sweating yet. So, like, there's no beads of sweat happening on my upper lip. I'm relatively comfortable in this. I think I could sit here in room temperature pretty much all day and just feel like I'm getting slightly warm right now without moving, which I think is a good thing. So overall, I'm really happy with this coat. The way it turned out, the design. I have to say here that Neyman Fencing, you know, through all the trials and tribulations they're going through right now, this was an old design I had with them. I had to recontact them, and I had to, you know, I worked pretty hard to help them to make sure to get this coat done for me. I tried to stay positive, and for me, it worked out. Now, I know there are other people who are having other problems with Neyman right now, but I also do know in the background that Neyman is working pretty hard and doing some pretty extraordinary things to try to keep their business running. I worked very closely with them over a very long period of time to get this coat done, and I'm very happy I did that. I'm very happy I didn't get negative and try to do something stupid that would not have resulted in this. With that being said, this coat turned out the way it did, and I don't think anyone else could have done this other than Neyman Fencing. I think a lot of people would have just laughed at me if I came to them and said, hey, can you make me this? Most people would have just said outright no. And some other people that may have been able to do it, I don't think could have done it with this look and this quality, with all of the inner pockets and, you know, all of the removable armor. I just don't think anyone else could have done that. And for that, I have to give Neyman Fencing credit. They did a great job with this coat. Outside of everything that's going on right now, almost every product I've got from them has been very top quality. Even this, which is a second version 1.5, was a pretty good glove. And I do understand that I think one of the areas that they had the most complaints about was this glove. So with that being said, I'm very happy with this coat. Hindsight is 2020. If I was made out of money and I could order another coat, I definitely have some things I would change on it. But that's, once again, hindsight is 2020. I'm already in love with the coat. I think this is going to be, like I say, unless I get more money to make another better coat, this is probably going to be my long-term coat. I don't see myself ever getting rid of this unless I can make a better one. The movement, the heat, everything. Like, I'm not overly hot right now. Everything about the coat is great. My movement feels as fast, if not faster, than I was with my other setup. So they knocked it out of the park with this. Thanks a lot for making this coat for me, Neyman Fencing and Matchka and everyone, names I can't remember right now, who were initially involved with this many, many, many moons ago. I'm happy with this coat. To everyone out there having any problems with Neyman Fencing, best of luck. Stay at it. Stay positive. They will help you in the end. And I'm just going to enjoy this coat. And I'm going to enjoy fencing. And once my finger heals, I'm going to be going pretty hard with this coat. So I may come up with a follow-up video about how is the coat holding up. But outside of that, look forward to my videos with me sparring, and you'll just see me in the coat. Thanks everyone for watching, and have a good evening. And remember, try to sword fight every day if you can. If not, watch videos, support channels, and try to do some reading. Thank you. Have a good evening.